So today's topic is love oneself, do what is good for me. And so if I ask you guys a question, do you love yourself? Do you want happiness? So I'm sure nobody can give me a no answer, right? It's automatic. We wouldn't think of any other way. And so how many of us really know so how to take care of ourselves? And we think we know, but not everybody think we know, right? And so if we really love ourselves and really want happiness, so why do we do things that harm ourselves? It happens actually quite often, right? So maybe at this point, you can think about some experience, right? Something happened, but you did not act in a way that'd be good for you and good for the others and good for the situation. You just did something that caused harm, actually result in negative results. And is that like something good for you? Something, if you really love yourself, if you really want happiness, will you do that that cause negative results? And sometimes, things happen, we blame ourselves, we scare ourselves, we feel guilt, we feel depression, and we don't really take care of our emotional and our physical health. All right, so our act then many times our act doesn't reflect the fact that we think we love ourselves and we know how to take care of ourselves. So even the ability to love oneself, it's maybe for some people is given, they just born with it. But for a lot of us, it's a learned skill. We need to nurture that skill, love ourselves. And so at least a few scenario here, right? So just think about when this thing happened to you, what's a better way to think? Like what is good for you? So the first one is your boss criticized you very, very harshly, right? Because you spend hours and hours doing something, and your boss just came and he figured out a problem in a few minutes and pointed out your mistake. And so that happens, you do have option, right? How you react. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be depressed, or you can be grateful. He come and let you know what you have done wrong and save you a lot of time. And so which way of thinking is better for you, better for your emotional health, better for your relationship, right? And the third scenario, like your child failed an important test at school. How do you react to the child is better for you and better for the child. So you can criticize, you can yell, or you can just understand and try to help him to find out what might happen, right? So I give you an example. So I have a good friend, and so her daughter actually very good student. So one time her daughter get 98 out of 100 from her school. So most parents think that's a fantastic score. And so her husband hugged her daughter and say, hey, congratulations about getting 98. But my friend was not so happy. And she make her daughter sit down and review all the questions and just analyze why did she lose that 2 points. So she even made her write a project plan, sort of plan what she's gonna do in the future to avoid losing that 2 points. So which I do think is the right, which one is good for her and good for the daughter, right? And the third one, you met at high school like a reverie. You guys were reverie at high school, and at that time you're better looking, you're stronger, you have better like academic results, everything better than this person. And then you met her on the street. Now she looked fantastic, right? And so she had like a good career, good family, everything was good, and you just like us at this point as so, right? And so how would you feel? Would you feel happy for her? Or would you feel jealous or other emotions? So which way is good for you? Good for yourself, mentally, physically, and good for your relationship, right? And the first one is you have been very nice to someone and you've been helping this person go way out of your way. But so somehow for no reason at all, so this person just turn against you. Just whatever help you offer to that person, sort of like nothing happened. You know, he suddenly forgot. And so if that happen, what's a better way of thinking like is more beneficial for you, right? So you can be angry, be resentful, and hate this person, right? Or you can just sort of like let go. Whatever happened past is gone, right? And I do things, you know, whatever I do is my decision, and how he react is his decision. I do not hold grudge. He has his way, I have my way. And so we can react differently, right? But which way is better? And so we can all give some thoughts, because things happen. So every day we make choice, like how we think, how we react. And so the principle we're supposed to have is which way is good for me? Do I really love myself? Do I really want happiness? If I do, then I should do things that are good for me. And so this is the next one is something I shared before. And so I want to illustrate the point that happiness and suffering is a state of mind, right? And if a person have a happy mind, so even though that person might have some physical pain, but he can still be happy. But if a person is very unhappy, just depressed, sorry for herself, just unhappy, and so regardless whether or not this person have physical pain, and because mentally he's not happy, then he's not happy. And for the same physical pain, right? And if you add mental suffering to the physical pain, you have fear, you have anxiety, you have frustration, then you make your physical pain worse, and you add a mental pain on top of this. And when a person also has physical pain, but no mental pain, right? And then that person only have physical pain, and mentally he may still be happy. And also if you're mentally more relaxed, that actually helps to cure that physical pain much quicker. So the mechanism is related to like the state of relaxation, right? So if you have a less anxiety, less irritation, so that particular body part is more relaxed. So when the person is physically more relaxed, so the body have a stronger self-healing power, so you can actually heal your physical pain quicker, right? And also when you're mentally relaxed, you just overall like feel better, right? And so from this chart, you can see whether or not the person mentally happy or mentally unhappy, right? It's really in the mind. It's somewhat determined by what happened, but not entirely, because the same thing can happen to different people. And because they react differently, the result can be very different. At least how they feel can be very different. And so this is the point of this chart. It's a state of mind. And so we talk about how to be emotionally strong and how to turn our mindset to be good for us, right? And so I'm going to use a quote by Alfred Adler. And so he said, so meanings are not determined by situations, but we determine ourselves by the meaning we gave to situations. And like I mentioned earlier, so same thing happened, same experience. So that particular experience is not really the cause for success or failure, right? So we do not suffer from the shock of our experiences or so-called trauma, but what we make out of them, just what suits our purpose, right? So I know some people like to blame what happened to them when they were a child. Their father did something, the mother did something, what happened to their school, or maybe even like whatever experience, earthquake or something. But a lot of people went through that. They do not carry any trauma. They can still be very optimistic. So one example just came up to my mind. So I read this book, I forgot the name now, by Austrian psychologist. The name is Minds Searching for Meaning of Life. I just somehow couldn't remember the name, right? So he was, okay, his whole family actually was locked up in Auschwitz by the Nazis. And so when all those men were caught and pushed to the Auschwitz, right? At the Auschwitz, and so the Nazis told them, you will never get out alive. So people who really believe that, they actually die very quickly. But there some people, they refuse to believe they will not get out of this place alive. And this psychologist, he's one of them. So he went through a lot of like physical, emotional suffering when he was in the concentration camp. But he got out alive, and actually, okay, his family died in the concentration camp. And so he actually have very successful and happy and positive life. So he got his like a helicopter pilot when he's 60, and he climbed some mountains when he's 80. So he had like very like positive life. And so whatever happened to him in a concentration camp, that's enough trauma for a lot of people. A lot of people went through in their life, not even in comparison what he went through, but that didn't defeat him. So it's really what you make out of that situation make a difference in your life. So a lot of people heard this before. So your thoughts become words, your words become action, and your action become your destiny. So even though it's a kind of a cliche, but that's really true. So our thoughts really matters in our life. And so a lot of things happen. And all this painful feeling, because we are human, we cannot help to have those feelings, right? So how do we deal with that? So I'm going to share something from Thich Nhat Hanh's book. He had many books. I sort of combined them. And so this one exercise I like to do, we can do this together, is to be mindful of our painful feeling, right? To be mindful means to be aware. So we recognize, we acknowledge, we're aware what feeling that are rising inside us. So whether that feeling is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And so when we have a feeling, so we recognize that feeling. So even recognize that feeling is actually very powerful. You sort of look at that feeling from an observer perspective. You create a distance between yourself and that feeling. And so one thing Thich Nhat Hanh mentioned is before we want to get in touch with our painful feeling, so we're supposed to try to generate this joyful feeling first, to have to be mentally strong, and then you deal with the painful feeling. So there's one simple exercise to generate a joyful feeling, is to do the breathing exercise. And this is his script. So if you guys don't mind, we can do this exercise together just for a few minutes. I know many of you come to my meditation session before, so you know how to do like this mindfulness meditation. So for those of you who don't, it's very simple. You can just stay where you are and try to be comfortable and try to be relaxed, right? And we're going to be aware of our breath. And when we are aware of the breath, we try to generate this feeling. We're going to do a very short exercise. Okay? So I'm going to hit the bell. And when I hit the bell, we can start by taking a few deep breaths. So we start by taking 3 deep breaths. Breathe in as deep as possible. Breathe out as slow as possible. Breathe in deep and breathe out slow. So when you breathe out, so you can imagine, so you are releasing all those negative emotions inside your body. Now we place our awareness on the tip of our nose, and we're going to watch our breath. Just be aware whether or not it's an in-breath or out-breath. Breathe in. I know it's a in-breath. Breathe out. I know it's a out-breath. Breathe in. I'm aware of the feelings of joy in myself. Breathe out. I smile to the feeling of joy that is in me. So to be alive is such a joyful thing. So we feel the life inside us and feel the joy of life. Breathing in, I'm aware of the feelings of happiness in myself. Breathing out, I smile to the feeling of happiness in myself. Breathing in, feel the joy. Breathing out, smile. When I hit the bell, just take a note how you feel physically and emotionally at this point. And slowly open your eyes. So we just did a very short mindfulness meditation by watching our breath. So the purpose of this exercise is to relax and feel the joy. And so when we're in a better mental state, then we'll be more capable of dealing with the painful feelings. And so if you do the whole thing, so at this point, so after do this feeling joy, smell, and then we can keep watching our breath and also be aware of the feelings. So when the feeling arises and you just watch that feeling with no judgment. And but be aware, this is the feeling. So this is a feeling, I have a feeling, this is a feeling of sadness. This is the feeling of frustration. Just know it. Even just knowing it is very, very powerful. So that's the exercise. And so that exercise we just did, it actually just sort of superficial, like kind of not deep enough, right? Because sometimes underneath we have some, I say, suffering, maybe from early experience, and so that exercise we just did is just not enough, because we have certain feelings we blocked off, and so just clinging to that joy and happiness won't solve the old, I guess, won't heal the old wound, put that way, right? And so we can go even deeper. You can first start with deep relaxation. So once you in a deep relaxation state, then you'll be strong enough to deal with all this hidden wound, those blocked or tucked away somewhere, right? And so the key is know where the suffering come from, because very often, so we do not know the nature of suffering, and the suffering actually hidden inside our consciousness. So we like to blame others. We blame the school, we blame the boss, we blame our neighbor, we blame our spouse, we blame the situation. So we like to like blame others and called external factors for our suffering. And so what we need to do is actually come home to ourselves and try to recognize our suffering and embrace it, right? And so first of all, blaming doesn't really help. It's not by blaming you can change others and change what happened outside. That's only cause you self feel more angry, more frustrated, and so sort of push you deeper in the negative thought. And if we just embrace, recognize what happened, and that actually can heal our own inside. And so Thich Nhat Hanh used this example, like he used a bitter melon. So bitter melon is a vegetable that tastes bitter, but then it's supposed to be really good for a person's health. It's a lot of like health benefits, but it is bitter. And so sometimes, nobody likes suffering. We sort of want to resist suffering. And so suffering actually have certain benefits, just like this bitter melon, even though it's bitter, but could have some health benefits. And so there's two ways to view sufferings, right? And one that's most of us do all the time, automatic, including me, right? And we do not like suffering. So we see suffering as something undesirable, unfavorable, and we resist any suffering, and we try our best or try at any cost to avoid suffering. And so one thing is, just because we don't like suffering, can that be enough to stop the suffering? If things happen, it still happen. And so this mental side doesn't really help. It's sort of useless. It's useless and also cause depression, anxiety, and irritation, because there's a saying, right? So the more you resist, the more it will persist, because the resist just cause us, like not what we cannot stop what happened, just caused us inside to suffer more. And another way is so seeing suffering as a normal part of life, except when it's already happened. Right? So there's things in life, something within our control and something outside our control. And even in this CBT model, so there's a situation like a stimulus, so that's fixed. Whatever happened is fixed, and that we cannot change. So that the the space that we have is our thought, right? So what thought I have to the thing happen and how I react. So that's our choice. That's our space of freedom. So if we see suffering as a normal part of life, and we don't get anxious and irritated, and we are in a calmer mind, and so when we're in the right mind, then the strength of our mind actually will enable us to bear more difficulties, so we can deal with the suffering in a better state of mind. And so on the other hand, if we see suffering as unbearable, resist, and if we're dominated by anxiety, right, even the tiniest problem become very difficult to cope with, because we do not like suffering. When that happens, we just feel very annoyed. Let's to start with. Then we feel fear, anxiety, all those, right? And then we have the additional burden. So in addition to what happened to us, like physical pain, for example, and then we have the additional burden of mental discomfort and unhappiness. So there's two ways to see suffering, and how we feel is very different on our outlook. If our outlook is think suffering just part of life, we accept, and I do what is good for me, and then the result is just more beneficial for ourselves. And so when suffering happens, and if we think it's just a normal part of life, so we actually have the ability to somewhat transform suffering. So it's not like there's nothing we can do. We have a space, some space here. Right? And so Thich Nhat Hanh had this book, so no mud, no lotus. So he used this as a metaphor, because lotus actually grown in mud. It seems like it's dirty, it's yucky, right? But out of that grown beautiful lotus. And so use this metaphor, he was trying to say, so the secret to happiness is to acknowledge and transform suffering, not to run away from it. Because like nobody likes suffering, because make us feel bad. So we try to run away. And so sometimes I think we all had that experience. We do not like to deal with our like internal feelings. If that internal feeling doesn't make us feel good, we feel like unsettled and uneasy, anxious, sad, angry, then we try to run away by doing something else, like talking to a friend, watching TV, go shopping, eat chocolate. So we do not want to face our internal feeling directly, and we try to run away. But run away doesn't really solve the problem. That wound is still there. It's not healed. It's going to pop up. And the longer it remains unhealed, the worse it will become. And so unless we're able to face our suffering, we cannot be present and available to life and happiness, and happiness will continue just to keep away from us, right? And so there's a saying, so when we know how to suffer, we actually suffer much, much less. So it makes sense too. If you know how to deal with it, then the impact on you can be much, much smaller. And so he suggests like 3 ways to transform suffering. And the first one is actually my favorite, right? So focus on sowing and watering our seeds of happiness. So this is sort of like indirect transformation, and to think about it as a garden, right? So there are different ways to deal with weeds. But if the garden is full of beautiful flowers, you just plant beautiful flowers, make them grow. And when your garden is filled with beautiful flowers, then you have less space for those whatever poisonous weeds or something. You just have less space. Just focus on sowing and watering the seeds of happiness. And the second one, that's supposed to be the preferred way, but that really need practice and patience, is to practice mindfulness continuously, right? So when the feeling come up, when the seeds of suffering arise, so we are able to recognize them and to being mindful. Mindful have its energy, and also the seed of suffering also have energy. But when that energy meet the energy of mindfulness, so mindfulness will win. We're going to reduce the power of suffering because we have the power of mindfulness. And the third way sort of have to do the first exercise first. You want to be emotionally strong first. And then when you're in the right emotional state, then you can even voluntarily invite all those negative feelings. Maybe you have some bad experience when you're a child happened to you. You don't want to touch that part, but that part is tucked away somewhere, and it's going to attack you when you least expect it. And so you can even invite those negative feelings just deliberately, and then you can deal with it if you're in a very strong mental state. That's the third way. And so one thing we need to keep in mind, right, is to acknowledge our suffering. So that's something we automatically don't want to do. When people ask, hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? Right? We always say, hey, I'm doing fantastic. I'm great. We don't really want to recognize that like uncomfortable emotion, whatever. So sometimes even though that emotion really eating you up, but you don't want to recognize. And even by recognize that we are suffering, that itself has power as well, right? And so there's a saying, by simply becoming aware of your inner world, you will empower yourself. And so there mindfulness exercise to do this one too, just recognize that we are suffering. And the similar, so you do the breathing exercise, then you generate the feeling of being happy. And then you can do this, just breathing in. I know that the feeling of suffering, despair, unhappiness, fear in me. And breathing out, I embrace the feeling of suffering in me. And so another point, right? And so we need to remember, so if you have a bad experience in the past, a dog attacked you, or somebody yell at you, or somebody say something to harm you. And so whenever you think about the past experience, you feel painful. I think most of us have that experience, right? So when we do the mindfulness meditation, so we need to be aware that whatever past is not the reality. And what caused our emotional suffer is not like what happened now. It's not the reality. The past sort of like an image. It's like an image inside us. And that image is causing us to suffer at this point. So once we recognize it's only an image of a photo, is something in the past. Once we recognize that, actually we will suffer much less. You know, it's an image. The image cannot really do anything at this point. So the example is, you know, some people, maybe they had bad experience in the ocean, and they almost drowned from the boat or from that. And then they get like fear of water, they get scared. And whenever they think about that experience, they get very fearful. And then if you realize that's only an image in your mind, right? Because when that thing happened, your mind camera take a picture and store it in your mind. And now you're recalling that image. That image make you feel fearful. And if you recognize that's only an image, it's not the reality, it's not what's happening now. The image cannot hurt you. And so that make the whatever bad past experience gonna hurt us less, because we recognize that it's only an image. So we talk about how to deal with the painful feeling, whatever the unpleasant feelings happen to us right now or in the past. And we also need to recognize, so suffering not just bad, not good for us. So suffering itself has have some goodness. And I think most people hear this like by Nietzsche, right? So that which does not kill us, make us stronger. Right? And also we hear the word like growing pain. So each of us, we do need like a certain amount of suffering, right? Just to grow up and to understand and cultivate our compassion, joy, and happiness. I think it's quite easy to understand this without you physically, emotionally experience some suffering. It's very hard to understand the suffering of others. And without understand that suffering of others, it's very hard to have like compassion. Compassion means you do not want others to have suffer. You wish others can be happy. So that understanding can only come after we experience some suffering. So suffering have some goodness. So I actually, maybe we can, so I ask you guys to think, right? So can you think of the experience, something, maybe something happened at work, right? And at first you think it's not a good experience, it's unpleasant. But somehow, because of that experience, you have grown stronger. You maybe you developed some skills and make you more marketable, and they turned out to be a good thing. You even have a new business or something. Anybody want to share an experience, like something seemingly bad happened, and then somehow, right, because how you deal with it, it turned out to be like a good thing. You actually growing stronger from that experience. Anybody want to share? So even for myself, like 2020 is a year like full of unwanted things, right? Nobody liked the year 2020, and like for me, one good thing like happened in that year is, even though I'm very restricted, right? I stay a lot more time like at home. I lost a lot of things, and so I consider the year 2020 for my spiritual growth. I just think 2020 is very productive year. No other year gave me that much opportunity to grow like spiritually strong. So there's like a silver lining out of all this unpleasant experience. And yeah, anybody you can share later. It's just like some experience, and you actually become stronger.
What experience?
Any experience, like some unpleasant, painful, and like if maybe you got laid off, you are sick, you have to move, or anything, any painful experience, and
there was a time.
that didn't really kill you, right? But you become stronger from that experience. You grown up, you gain something.
There was a time that I overdosed on nutmeg. I took nutmeg, and I took too much, and I had a very painful experience. I had to end up going to the hospital. I had to be hospitalized. This was around 3-4 years ago.
And so what happened later?
I just went through the experience, but it was like a painful experience. You know, the process of everything, being in the hospital, it just didn't feel great at all.
So do you still feel the pain from what happened?
I don't think so.
So you overcome that now?
Yeah, it's in my past.
Right. So do you feel like you become stronger, but now you're more capable of dealing with similar experience?
Yeah, yes.
right? So with next something similar happen to you, you'll be in better position, a better emotional state to deal with it. So you are a stronger person.
Yes.
So there's some benefit from the pain. We don't just experience pain for nothing. We grow, we learn from it.
Yes, 100%. I agree.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So that suffering has some goodness in it, right? And so another concept I like to introduce is a concept of impermanence. So I don't know how many of you heard this concept, impermanence. And so impermanence means not permanent, means it constantly change. So years ago, I met an old lady. At that time, she's like in late 70s. So she told me, like 30 years ago, right? She went to this like Buddhist temple, and there's one concept she really remembered is impermanence, and so that really benefit her whole life. So she remembered the principle of impermanence, and then later on in her life, so whatever happened, like her husband death, her children, something happened, and because she really lived with this principle, like life is impermanent, so whatever happened to her, so didn't really I guess shock her or didn't really defeat her like emotionally. So now she's in her 80s, right? So she get her, I think, a pastor, an interfaith pastor like certificate when she's in the 70s, and now she's in her 80s, so she's still going to hospital, as before COVID anyway. So she's still going to a hospital to comfort patients, to see patients. She's very active. She's very healthy, and so the one principle that benefit her is this impermanence, because things constantly change, and if you refuse that change, you want things to stay the same. That's just not very rational, and so that impermanence principle really changed her perspective of life. And now she's like every day when she wake up in the morning and she's still alive, she sees the sun, she just feel very happy. And so because she told me this impermanence principle, and so that really make me think, what is really impermanence. And so by definition is all compounding things are impermanent. So all that exists is impermanent. Nothing lasts. Therefore, nothing can be grasped or held onto. So on the surface, we think everybody understand what this impermanence means, right? Things keep changing. Like this picture, we have same tree. So same tree went through different season. We have winter, spring, fall, like summer and fall. So things keep changing. The water runs all the time. It don't stay on the same for any second. But some things that we think is permanent. So for example, like a building, right? A piece of marble, the road, the company, the city, the mountain, and even a piece of furniture, the house. We don't think it's changed. When you look at the house today, it looks the same. When you look at the house tomorrow, it's the same. But if you look at the house in 100 years, would it still be the same? And if you just finished renovating the house, you paint the wall, you paint in external and internal, it looks new. After 5 years, after 10 years, would it still be the same? So we know it can be different. So does the house just all of a sudden look old in 10 years, in 20 years? It's not, right? So it's actually change every single second. Why? Because we know the end is change. So even something, our palace, even the Great Wall, right? If after 1,000 years it's change, or after 2,000 years change, that means it didn't change all of a sudden in 1,000 years. It's changed every single second. So even our body changed every single second. So we have cell, die, and we have cell being newborn, and each breath we take is different, right? And I can only breathe the air at this moment. I cannot breathe air of the past. I cannot breathe air in the future. So even as we are sitting here, even I'm talking, I'm no longer the same person, right? So my body change, and think of our person, we have a spiritual world and we have a physical part. And my physical change every single second, and my spirit part change every single second. My feeling, my emotion, my thought, they change every single second. They don't stay the same. So that's impermanence, just constantly changing. That's the only thing that doesn't change, is the change itself. It's constantly changing. And so the awareness of impermanence and appreciation of human potential, right? So will give us a sense of urgency that we must use every precious moment. That's a quote by Dalai Lama, because like, you have your spouse, you have your children, and the people like 20 some us like stay here, right? So that's, we are here at this moment, and this moment doesn't stay forever. So that make us appreciate each moment a lot more, because that moment can only stay for 1 second. It's actually like a fraction of a second, then it's gone, it can never return. And so that's really give us a sense of appreciation, a sense of urgency to do the things we want to do. And so this impermanency, right? Impermanence of life, if we can remind ourselves to think about this when we confront adversity, and also as our negative emotion become overwhelmed, and that's really very helpful, because really nothing stays. Even regardless how sad you feel, how happy you feel, it's just a moment thing. The second moment, you never know what happened. And so even the suffering is also impermanent. It's change. So impermanent is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually, for us, is a good thing, because things change. That means the whole world is full of opportunities. It's full of potentials. So impermanent constantly change, because that means everything is possible, and the suffering will not stay, and my temporary happiness will not stay, and just full of like future potentials. And so I think in the year 2020, we hear this all the time: this too shall pass. So breathe in, and this too shall pass, which is true. It will pass, regardless how bad it is, will pass. So given that perspective, I think it does help us to think more positive. So there's some principles how do we deal with this world full of impermanence. So there's 5 principles. I'm just going through them very quickly. So Thich Nhat Hanh has a quote: "So impermanence does not necessarily lead to suffering. What makes us suffering is wanting things to be permanent when they are not." Because it just something, how the world operates. That's why we accept impermanence as normal. And when things happen, we share and we let go. Even though you don't let go, it passes anyway, right? You might just let go. And we find opportunities in impermanence. And because each moment is so precious, so we be thankful for every day, and we treat life as finite. And so in everyday life, we want to shift our focus on what's great. And so there's a quote: "So everything else in life is a bruise except for death." And so when things happen, if we can think in a different perspective, and so the impact of that particular thing on us will not be that great, right? Just everything else in life is a bruise except for death. So I'm just going, I'm going to slam my time almost right now. So I'm going to just quote this few saying, right? And so David Lieberman once said, we can find reason to dislike anyone, but it's what you focus on and appreciate in a person that cultivates a positive relationship. And when we feel bad for ourselves, and we can think of a different perspective, think a more positive perspective. So this is this thing I think we you all heard this before. So I felt sorry for myself because I have no shoes until I met a man who have no feet. And then there's a mentality of half glass, full glass, one glass there, one still one glass. And if you like, I think it's happened to me because one time I don't have money to travel to Europe. I kind of feel bad. I say, hey, I can only do a driving tour. And so that's not a good mentality. If I think, hey, I can still do a driving tour, I can still do a driving vacation, right? It's that gave me a different feeling. Hey, I can still do this. I still have a car. I still have a house. You cannot say, hey, I can only do a driving tour. So that still and can or only so make a difference on how we feel. And so in life, right, what help us to survive most is this so-called greed, right? So there's a research, they studied this like 11,000 cadets at West Point, and the conclusion they have is, so greed is more important for success than brains and brawn. And so a person who can fall down 7 times and stand up 8, and the person who never gave up, so that's a person who can walk a long way. That's a person who will success in life. So the last one is because we love ourselves. When we do things, we want to what is good for me, what is good for us, right? So when you do something, so you can ask yourself, is what I'm thinking good for me? Is what I'm doing, actually should be doing, or what I'm going to say good for me? Is what I'm going to do good for me? Just pause for 5 seconds. If you think you're going to do something, say something negative, just pause for a second, ask yourself. And there's one exercise we can do. If I know for a lot of women is have more of this problem. They like to blame themselves. If the party doesn't go well, if the children fail a test, they like to blame themselves. And so there's exercise we can do. You can look at the mirror. You can do like breathe in, I do my best, and breathe out, I let go of the rest. So that's a simple like affectionate breathing exercise we can do. I think that's what I'm going to share tonight. It actually took longer time than I thought. I thought I can finish in 40 minutes. Maybe I talk too much. Anybody have any